Hey everybody, welcome to another webinar at poststatus.com. My name is Corey Miller. I'm one of the partners at PostStatus, and I have three of my good friends I've known a very, very long time in WordPress. They are co-authors of Show It Brad, the WordPress or Professional WordPress Plugin Development. I was almost going to say for dummies, by the way, in its second edition. So we have the one and only Brad Williams. He is co-founder of Web Dev Studios. He's going to be sharing with you some live coding, so we're gonna check Brad's skills today. And then, of course, his co-author John James Jacoby. He's got a lengthy resume. You know him as a core contributor for WordPress and BuddyPress and others. And then in the chat, you're going to have Justin Tadlock of WP Tavern fame, but also I'm blanking, Theme Hybrid fame. So you're in for a really great, practical, actionable webinar today. So I have a question for you in the chat first before I turn it over to Brad, John, and Justin. What are you looking to learn today? What are you hoping when this webinar ends that you've taken a step in being able to produce your first WordPress plugin? Is there a question you have, burning question you have, something you're stumped on? I'd love for you to put that in the chat so John, Justin, and Brad can see that. And so I'm going to let you do that right now. Tell me your learning outcome. What at the end of this webinar, what do you want to have learned? So I'm excited to kick this off and hand it over to the real talent here, Brad, John, and Justin. But thanks guys again for doing this and being willing to do it live too.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. This is going to be fun. So I am driving the bus today, if you will. I'm going to be writing some code. John's my co-pilot over here. Feel free to jump in at any point, John. Looking for some support, and definitely call me out when I'm doing stuff wrong, because that's the best thing to do in a live presentation. No, please do, because we want to make sure we're talking best practices and things like that. So we only have an hour today, so I want people to keep that in mind. We're going to work through a functional plugin. The idea of this plugin is to touch on a couple different parts of the WordPress and the APIs available, but I wanted to put something that I feel like is a very good real life example of what some of you might be looking to do. So we're going to build a plugin. We're going to register a custom post type. That's pretty straightforward. A lot of you are probably familiar. And what we're going to do is connect to an external API and grab some data from that API and import that directly into that custom post type, including different information from the API as well as images as well. So, and when we're done, I'll release the code on GitHub so everyone can check it out. So I don't feel like you have to code along with me unless you're really into that, which would be tricky, but I will make it available to everyone. Please do ask questions in the chat. We got Justin in there. John will help as well. And let's dive in. Anything to add to that, John?
No, I think the one thing that was hard for me last time was it's impossible for me to type and code at the same time. So I think if depending on how this goes, that I might try and fill some silence while you're copying and pasting, and typing and coding and everything else. And so
like talking and coding at the same time, right?
Walking, chewing gum. I finally mastered that.
Yep.
Talking and coding though is a little trickier. So otherwise I'm gonna let you drive, but I'll fill in the blanks wherever I can.
Yeah, please do. And one thing to note, we only have an hour, so we're not going to be able to take this as far as we would want, but we'll certainly try to call out areas that we would want to take a little bit further. Things like caching, some considerations around performance, stuff like that. We probably will not have time to get into that, but we'll call out some areas that you would want to look at and probably take a little bit further if you had more time. So, but with that, let me share my screen. Can I share my screen? Here we go. Ta-da, and I'll try to make the text nice and big here. All right, so I have should be able to see my screen now. Everything look all right. I have
looks good.
Vanilla install of WordPress, the latest version, 5.5. Running on my local, so I'm starting kind of fresh here. You can see this is what you expect when you install WordPress. I've only added one plugin from the repo, which I'll talk about in a minute, but we're going to start from scratch. So in my local, I've set up my post status WordPress install. You can see here. So let's just go right into the plugins directory. We need to make a place for our new plugin. This is the Hello Dolly plugin, if you haven't seen it. Good little plugin if you've never written a plugin, this is kind of a cool spot to start. Just change some lyrics, see what happens on the screen, stuff like that. But we're going to start from scratch. So we'll go into our plugin directory. We always highly recommend you don't have to put your plugin in a folder, but we recommend you do, even if it's a single file, because you never know down the road if you want to add another file to it and it's not in a folder, it can get a little messy. So let's go ahead and make a new folder in our plugins directory. I'm using Sublime, by the way, the Sublime text editor. I know, John, you're a NetBeans fan, which I've used from time to time. There's a lot of editors out there. Find which one you feel is best for you. We actually cover quite a few of them in the book that are really popular. We do. So let's make a folder here. Let's just call this, we always want to prefix. So I'm going to prefix everything with a PS and a hyphen for post status. Keep it unique. Make sure people don't stumble on the same thing. And we're going to connect to an API that has some movies. And I'm a big fan of the scary movie genre. So we're going to pull in some horror movies. Ooh. You know, and it is, Halloween's coming up. I'm actually seeing Halloween stuff in the store, pumpkin beers out there, so it's appropriate. So let's just call this our movie, PS movie importer. We won't make it too specific to scary movies yet. So now I have an empty folder. What do I do now? I need to make a file, a PHP file, and guess what I'm going to call it? I'll just put a thing because I have to put in there to save it. Called the same thing, .php. I like to keep it consistent. Save it, and now we have a blank PHP file that does nothing. So if you go into the plugin directory, nothing shows up. So we need to put some stuff in here. So the first thing we start with is the plugin header. This is what basically allows WordPress to recognize you have a plugin in this directory. It's very simple. There's a number of different values you can put in here. You know what I should start with? By opening PHP tag.
Isn't it crazy? I swear, as soon as you start talking while you type, your brain just stops working. It's incredible how amazing it is. Everyone should live code. Everyone should do it at least once just to see, because it's just the way that it's really hard to like remember to do all the basic things while you're also typing, unless you like unless you talk out everything you're typing, which doesn't make sense to do here either. I'm looking at the chat right now, thinking of all the questions that I could try and answer, because I know Justin's trying to go through. So Brad, while you're doing this, why don't I take some questions from chat right away? I'll touch on some stuff real quick, because this is sort of the easy part. But I know Amy Letson said that she's here for general best practices and gotchas. So we're bound to cover a ton of that stuff today. Even just naming the first file the same as the plugin directory is one of those best practices that the reason to do it that way is because I think that's just what people expect. If you go into your plugin / BuddyPress, you expect for BuddyPress.php to be the thing that's there. Yep. There's just all these little things that you kind of learn over time, but when they're different, it's kind of a pain. So we're going to cover a ton of the best practice stuff almost invisibly, because it's kind of just muscle memory, I think, at this point.
Some of it is, yeah. And really, in my opinion, you know, these are while there's other values we could put in here, this is kind of the core of what you're looking for. Plugin name, the URL or link to the either a website or maybe a blog post or somewhere that they can learn more about the plugin specifically. Description, what is it? The author, who are you? Is it your company? Is it your name? And then a URL to the author as well. Pretty simple, right? Save this, go back to our plugins page, and guess what? WordPress sees our plugin. Look, there's the name, there's a description, there's my name, it links to my site. The plugin, visit plugin site, goes to the plugin site or URL. And guess what? I can activate this now. It's activated. And what does it do? Nothing. But it's there. And honestly, the first time I did this years ago, just seeing it show up was pretty freaking exciting. Like I felt like I was doing something, even though it didn't do anything. It was like, just to get something to show up here, as simple as that looks, the first time you do it is pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
One other thing I'd recommend putting in here, which I don't have readily available, but is just the license that you want to release it under. Generally, it's going to be GPL version 2, which is the WordPress license, or some kind of GPL compatible license. But if you're going to release your code publicly, make sure you state what is the software license you're releasing it under, so it's very clear and no one's making assumptions that it's GPL or otherwise. So we have a plugin. Let's make it do something. The first thing we're going to do is register a custom post type. This is definitely one of the probably more common things you've run across. We're going to kind of breeze through this a little bit because, again, it is more common. Also, let's make sure we comment our code. Let's talk about what we're doing in the comments. As silly as it may seem, it'll save you a lot of headaches down the road. So register our movie custom post type. Simple as that. Now I know what I'm doing here. So first thing we're going to use is a action hook. John, maybe you can touch on what hooks are and action hooks quickly.
Sure. So WordPress comes with an API underneath most of WordPress that is called hooks. At this point, is a class now called WP hook. But you mostly interact with it via some global functions, do action, apply filters, those kind of things. Hooks are just intercept points. They are places in PHP's execution cycle that allow for you or plugins or things to just hook in and do something else. And so there are two kinds. There are actions and there are filters. So actions are simply just a point in time where something else can happen. And filters are a little bit magic. Something goes in and then you get to decide what comes back out of it. So two examples or common examples or reasons you would use them are like a hook or an action is just when the user logs in, you want to do something else, or when WordPress is fully initialized, you want to register your custom post type like Brad is doing here now. But if inside that, even inside like the register custom post type function, inside register post type is a filter that lets you tweak what those arguments are inside of it. So when a plugin is calling that function, it is possible for another plugin to filter the arguments and decide that they want it to be or do something completely different than what it thought it would do in the first place. So all of WordPress plugins use hooks. They're super powerful. They are what make plugins work. And so they're the best, I think. Hooks are great.
We have an entire chapter dedicated to hooks. That's how important they are. So yes. You're not going to know all of them. There's a lot of them. There's thousands of them at this point, but there's going to be some common ones you use on almost everything you do. And init is going to be one of those. So init's essentially saying everything in WordPress that needs to be loaded for you to do stuff is ready to go. And that's really the earliest that you can kind of hook into WordPress and know that things are going to be initialized. And we start calling certain functions or files, they're going to exist. So in this case, we're saying, hey, everything's initialized. Let's register our post type. We made a post type. We're going to call it movie. We're going to put some labels on it. So a singular is a movie. The name is movies. We're supporting some different attributes here. The title, the editor, some other items, thumbnail, which is the featured image. We're going to make it public. We're going to set that it has an archive. We're going to make sure the slug is what we want, which is what you see in the URL. We don't want it to be movie. We could have it /movie. I kind of want it to be /movies with an S. And then show and rest just means it's available in the REST API. There's a lot more options here. I'm trying to keep this simple. I save it.
There are a lot more options there.
There's a lot, as we saw in episode 1.
Right. And Justin mentioned in chat that hopefully it works better in episode 2 than it did in 1, because I think I struggled for like 5 or 10 minutes trying to get the post type to actually show up the way that I wanted it to.
You might have saw I copy and pasted that because I didn't feel like typing it all out for that very reason.
Exactly.
Guess what? We have movies. Nothing there, but we have movies post type. Very simple. Post type equals movie. I kind of breezed through that bit just because it's common and I want to focus on some of the other areas. But now we have a post type. We could easily click add new and manually enter, our entries just like you would a post or a page. You can see we have our excerpt. We have our featured image. These are the things that we set. We have our title and our text. So now that we have a post type, we have somewhere for the content to live. We want to make our importer to import some data. So the first thing we need is how are we going to trigger this? Where are they going to trigger this? So what I want to do is make what you might call a settings page or a separate page where we can work on that importer code. There's a couple ways we could do this. We could do a new top level menu. So like, appearance plugins, users, tools, those are top level menus. We could add a new one down here that says movie importer. While that works, generally the rule of thumb is if you only have like a single page, a single settings page, why clutter up the admin menu with a whole top level menu just for that one page? right? So we could also put it within settings. We could make it a submenu of settings or submenu of tools. But, and this I think was a suggestion from Justin. I think where it makes the most sense is we're working with movie data. Why don't we put the link as a submenu in our CPT? That way, when we're working with movies, we know exactly where our movie importer is. So I'm going to add a submenu page under our CPT here. And guess what we need to do that? We're going to use a hook. And first, we're going to comment, right? So let's register a submenu under our movie CPT. Simple. So we are going to use a hook called admin_menu. This is the preferred hook for registering menus. So the hook is the first attribute. The second attribute is the function we want to call. Let's call it PS create menu. Kind of tells us descriptively what we're doing. Again, we want to prefix everything. We don't just want to call it create menu or create_menu, because if anyone else tries to register a function, or if WordPress has a function called create menu, it's going to blow up. It's going to be bad. So you don't want to do that. That's why you always want to make it unique, and having a simple prefix across everything you do can help with that. So next up, we're going to use we need to make our function that we just defined, PS create menu. Simple, simple. Now we have a function. So we're going to use a WordPress function called add submenu page. John, you showed this last time, and Sublime supports this as well. But when you hover, I have a lot of projects in one, or a lot of folders in one project. So it's kind of picking it up across all of them. But if I hover, I can go down here to my post status, and I can see exactly where that function is defined within the WordPress core. And guess what? This beautiful documentation that's included tells me all about this function, tells me about the different parameters that this function can accept or is expecting. Nobody remembers all of this stuff. Even the best developers do not remember this stuff. It's hard to remember everything, right? So it's a quick way just to refresh the values I need to pass into here to do what I need to do. So let's go back to our function now that we've seen that. So the first, if we look at this, the first value is the parent slug. So that's basically saying what menu are we attaching this to as a submenu. This being a custom post type, we can just take the link right there. You can see edit PHP, post type equals movie. If we go to our post type, guess what? It's right here. You can also define other, you could easily add, using the same function, you could add this menu under one of the existing menus as well. But in this case, we're going to add it to movie. Next up is the title of the page, which is what you would expect to see in the title tag or in the browser tab. So we'll just call this movie importer page, whatever you want to call it. Then the actual text for the submenu item that you're going to see in the menu. So this is important. Let's call it import movies, right? Now we want to set the capability who can see this menu. Can everybody see this menu, including subscribers? Maybe only administrators can see this menu. In this case, let's just keep it to administrators. So we'll set a capability that only administrators have by default, which is manage options. That means if you're allowed to manage options or the settings on a website, you will see this, which is an administrator. If you're not a subscriber, author, editor, by default, you will not see this menu. So we only want admins right now to see this menu.
And if you get confused about capabilities or roles or which one to pick or why, it's like not unusual because there's so many of them. But the reason that everything in WordPress gets kind of connected to caps or capabilities is because the best way to partition the things off in WordPress admin or on your WordPress website is by what it is that they can already do, or what's the logical connection to what it is that you're trying to let this user be able to accomplish. So like if they can make posts and they can make pages, they're going to need to be able to upload media probably. And so it makes sense that they would share that functionality under some similar type of capability. So same with movies, right? But like not every user should be able to import or be able to change the settings for what it is that we're trying to do today. So manage options makes sense because if they can manage the options or the settings of the site where you can basically set everything, then they should be that same user should be able to do these things on this submenu as well.
Yep, exactly. Let me just shrink this up. So I've created my submenu page. The last couple ones is this PS-movies is just a unique slug. It's what you'll see in the URL. And then this final one is the, did I miss it? Oh no, my screen's just weird. The final one is the function we're going to call. So when I click on that menu, what are we going to actually call? So now if I save this and refresh, if everything works, boom, import movies. That's cool.
Good job, Brad.
Our submenu. Thanks.
It was there the whole time. You just voila, you boomed it into existence.
Now, if I click it, nothing happens because I haven't actually registered my function that is going to do some stuff. So now we get into the fun part, right? We got our CPT, we got our submenu. Now let's do something. And what we're going to do is connect to an API. The API that I like to use, this is a really cool site. We mentioned it in the book. It's called sampleapis.com. What? Oh, good. My sample API website is not going to work.
It's amazing.
Well,
live coding, folks.
Oh, goody. All right. Well, let's just hope that comes back up in the next few minutes. Worked perfectly the last few weeks as I was testing this out. So anyways, we're going to write some code and hope it comes back up. But what I want to show you is when you're working with an API, you're working with some kind of JSON object, which is kind of it's a bit of a standard at this point. An API is going to give you something back generally, right? It's going to give you content in some kind of format. What we see a lot of times now is JSON. You might be familiar with maybe XML. It could be something else, but JSON's a really popular one that you might get, that you would expect to get data back. So there are some really great tools you can use. Postman is one that I like. We mentioned this. In fact, I won't refresh this because you can see I hit this API. I do a simple GET request. And what it does, it just shows me what's going to come back. So this is cool, right? I said, hey, let's hit this API. There's a horror movie genre. It came back. It's a 200. It's a good response. I have some data here. So the first item it gave me back is the movie Get Out. It gave me a link to the movie poster, and it also gives me the IMDb ID number, which I can link out to IMDb with that. Cool, pretty basic content, but I can actually see. So this is a good way to make sure your API is kind of returning what you want before you start writing code and trying to figure out why something's working. Maybe the API is down like we just saw. So it's a good way to test it out. You can also do authorization if there's some authorization that needs to be done, basic auth, other opportunity or other ways you can do some authorization. You can punch in any API. It's a great way. There's other tools. This one I like. It's really just clean and works well. So it's a good way to make sure the data looks like you expect before you start working with it, and it'll save you some headaches down the road.
So I verified sampleapis.com is down for me also. Justin mentions an important thing that I think is worth touching on while you figure out how you're going to backfill this, I guess, Brad. But like this is kind of one of those learning experiences where if you are relying on this third-party API and you are going to be making requests to this API, just like Brad has it in Postman already, if this was a thing that we had already built, one of the things that we would be talking about right now is caching this result. Yep. It's making sure that if this API is down or does fail, that we don't accidentally overwrite the good data with bad data that has failed from this API. So caching this or putting that data someplace, requesting it, and then leaving it someplace, and then only accepting good data from that third-party API is one of those best practices that like you pretty much always have to do, but you have to learn the hard way. Like you have to have screwed this up and like gotten bad data or accepted bad data to go like, oh, this is super broken. How do we undo this? How do we get ourselves back out of here? So good learning experience.
Yeah,
live in the show.
So we'll start writing the code. Hopefully it comes back up. If not, we'll see if we can plug in another a different API and maybe get you might have to make some adjustments. But we're going to use a really cool function called WP Remote Git. So basically, it's as simple as saying, all right, we want to set a variable. We're going to use WP Remote Git, and we want to pass in the URL of the API that we want to hit. The beautiful thing about WP Remote Git is, as with a lot of WordPress functions within the API, we don't have to figure out how the server, what method the server is going to go get it. There's like, what, 4 different ways, I think, in core that WordPress could potentially go get this data based on your server setup, your local setup, you know, whether you have things like curl available or not. That's one of the great things about WordPress. You can use the functions and APIs they have available, and WordPress will try to figure out, okay, how can I retrieve this the best way based on the server setup or whatever it is, because there's a million different ways to configure things. WP Remote Git will figure it out. And if you can hover it and you can go check it out in core, and it will kind of walk you through, well, you got to dig a little bit because it goes in here and blah, blah, blah. But basically, once you track it down, it'll walk you through what it checks to try to retrieve this data. So that basically goes out to that API, grabs the data and brings it back, drops it into my request variable. Now I need to do something. We talked about, if there's a problem with it, right? So and if we look at Postman, I got a 200 status 200 okay. That means, hey, the request was good and successful. You got something back. Well, it was successful. Well, you got something back, depends on what you're doing, but it was successful. So the next thing we want to do is just make sure there's no error, no problem with it, right? And this is a simple check using another WordPress function. Is there an error? Then let's bail on it because something went wrong, which would probably happen right now because it's not available. And we could even test it out. But it would, before we go to try to parse something that doesn't exist, we're making sure that there wasn't a problem, that it does exist. Now, let's say it works, right? We got it back. It gives you back a lot of data, which I could show you, but we're going to parse through it. So what we want to do is we really only want the body. In this example, we only want the body of the response. And hey, guess what? WordPress has a function for that. It's called WP Remote Retrieve Body. So it's got to take that request value that came back from the API that's in our request variable, and it's going to essentially extract the body of it and put into a body variable. And that's what we're going to work with. So now we also have, again, this is JSON format, which I can't show you I can show you the raw. So this is what the raw looks like. If you were to bring it up in your browser, it's ugly, right? It's hard to read, but it's a format that a computer can easily parse because it's a expected format. So basically what we want to do is say, all right, let's break this up in a way that we can actually work with it in an easier manner. And we're going to use a function called Json To Code, which is a PHP function. And it's basically going to decode that JSON format and get it in a way that we can, in a format that we can work with it a little bit easier. Basically put it in an array. We're going to loop through it because there's a lot of entries, right? I think there's 77 in this response. So we have 77 entries we want to go through and check out and see what's in there and if we're going to use it. So to do that, we always want to make sure that before we start working with data that something exists again. So let's just make sure it's not empty.
Not empty, and the empty function is my favorite function in PHP. I use it all the time. I use it everywhere. And we should all use it more, frankly, because it covers all the edge cases. It covers is set, it covers if it's no, it covers if you didn't set it at all. It works on arrays, it works on objects.
Catch all.
Yeah, and since we tend to use false and null for like error checking or for like looking to see if we've populated a variable with something, Michael just caught that you've got if not empty date instead of data. So it's yep, perfect.
Catch typos.
And yeah, empty is great. I have to warn you, Brad, you're at the halfway point for our hour already. No pressure, but you're doing great.
No pressure. Okay, so we made sure it's not empty. So this exclamation point says if not empty, right? So if I took that out, it would say, hey, if it's empty, let's do something. We're saying if it's not empty, let's do something. So I've made a little conditional if statement here. And what we're going to do, we're actually going to loop through that data. Because again, the data is an array from each individual entry from the JSON response is an entry within the array. So we want to loop through it. So
one of the things that you can do now too for eaches, which WordPress has a polyfill for now also, is you can check and see if it's an array or if the data array is countable or iteratable, which are like newer functions and newer versions of PHP to see like, it doesn't matter if it's empty or not, because it could be empty data, could be true. It could be a string. It could be something that you aren't even really hoping for it to be. Json To Code may have come back with some funky result. And so empty checks to make sure that it actually has something in it. But sometimes before you for each loops through something, especially if it's data that you can't trust, in this case, we trust it, it doesn't really matter. But like, if you're not sure, then you can use is countable or is iterable or is array before doing a for each, just to make sure that you're actually looping through something that can get looped through.
Great point, John. As I frantically look for another API. So
somebody posted something in the chat that was, if I could spell it for you, you can grab it. Steve Ryan says another API example is HTTPS regress.in, REGRES.in. Never heard of it. I'm sure it's great. REGRES.in. Oh, maybe that's the same issue you're having, but no, it can't be because it was down for me too, unless it's the world is broken.
I found another one. We'll see. We can plug it in and we'll see what happens. But we'll have to adjust my code a bit. We'll see if we have time. Hopefully we do. So now that we're looping through, we're basically saying, all right, for each data as movies, we're going to work with the movie. I would show you what exists in movie, but basically those values, actually I can't show you those values we talked about, or I showed you on Postman. If I go back to my here, I have, these are my values. I have ID, I have title, I have poster URL, and I have IMDb ID. And I can simply call those by doing movies title. And guess what? That is the title of the first movie. So that would be Get Out. So cool. So what I like to do when I'm doing stuff like this is put some messaging for the user, right? So which in this case is me. But I want to know, hey, which movie are we looking at and what's happening? So in this case, let's just do a simple echo checking, or let's just say importing movie, and then we'll just do that. So it's going to say,
and if you wanted to, Brad, you could take that result out of Postman and just throw it into a string in your code just for now. That's just so it would work, and you can show people what it looks like to iterate through that. Would be the same as if we cached it.
That's a great idea. If I don't accidentally rerun it, let me see. Can I? Here we go. Copy. Okay. This is going to be ugly, and it probably won't work the first time.
Never does.
Basically, what I'm doing is I'm going to bypass that request. Woo. I'm going to need to clean that up a bit. I might just see if I can get one of them to work. Let me just throw that in another file so I don't lose it, and we'll come back to that in a minute.
Good thinking. It would be almost the same way as if you were caching it someplace. Like if you had it in an option, you had it in a transient, you had it someplace where you could stash it.
Mm-hmm.
So at least this way we can hold on to that and hopefully loop through it like you were hoping to be able to.
Okay. All right. Got it saved. Cool. So I think we can make that work. That's a good idea, John. All right. So let's go back to our code. We got, all right, we're checking movie and then it'll tell us the movie title. Great. Now we know which one it's looking at. Now we need to do something. So what we want to do is we want to import this, or basically create a post in our new CPT. We're going to use a function called, well, in a minute, WP insert post. But the first thing we want to do is set all of our values for that new post. So meaning the title and the content. So the first thing we're going to do, let's look at the title. Again, we set this as an array, and this is going to be passed into a WordPress function. Post title, movies title. I'm going to use escape HTML. It's a security feature. Essentially, escape HTML will basically, at the end of the day, we don't want to trust what's coming back from this API because we don't know, right? It might look great the first time we do it, and a year from now, some bad, something gets injected into that API. We need to make sure the data we're getting is safe. Basically, don't trust the data, right? We don't know. We expect it to be a movie title, but we don't know. So basically, I'm going to escape any HTML that comes through. There's a number of different things you could do here. That's kind of a quick and easy, basic way. We have a whole chapter on performance and security that goes through the different methods that you want to consider. The next one,
whether or not you save escaped data is kind of up to your application too. You might not want escaped HTML in your database for whatever it is that you're trying to do, and you might want to strip it out after the fact, or you might want to bring it in pristine from your API and then escape it later, or strip tags out of it later, or do something else. So a lot of the times these escaping functions or sanitizing the data that comes in, there isn't always 100% one rule that you're going to want to use for some of this stuff. It kind of depends.
Yes, security is just one of those things that needs to be at the forefront. Do it as you go. Don't go back and say, that didn't later. Do it as you go. And it quickly becomes a habit. Now, this one, I think there's some, you can make the argument, I'm just escaping this. This is the IMDb ID. I don't know enough about IMDb. I'm assuming the IDs are always numbers, integers. If that's the case, we could use something like absent, which will always make sure it's a positive integer. I don't know enough about that. There might be some characters in there. So basically what I'm doing is an escape attribute, which is like if it's an attribute of markup like a href, a alt text or something like that. You can make the argument that maybe you just wrap the whole URL in like escape URL or something. Would probably be another argument. Again, you really want to think about the data you're using. But if you're only expecting a number, then make sure you're only working with a number. So basically what I'm saying is, all right, the content, I'm just going to make it a link. I'm linking to the IMDb entry for that movie. I'm putting the title in that makes it clickable, and that's it. I'm just making it very simple, right? And the next three, again, are just kind of basic. The status, we're going to go published. You can make this draft. Maybe you want to make it moderated or something, but we're just going to go live with it. Post author is the ID of the user. That's going to be the author. In this case, I just hard-coded 1, which is me. I'm the admin. I'm the first user. Obviously, you can make this more dynamic or something, but right now, for the sake of this, we'll make it simple. And then post type. This is important. We want to make sure it goes into our movie post type, not the post or the page post type, but our movie post type. Right? And
exactly right. Even the post type is one of those things that we haven't been namespacing here, but there could be a million plugins that use post type movie for something, and it's up to you to decide if you want to namespace your post type or if what you're going for is compatibility with all plugins that might happen to register a post type that is also called movie, right? Like, that's one of the things with WordPress and custom post types is how portable do you want for your data in your plugin to be. Dane asked a question quick. Is it worth escaping the title once to a variable and then using that variable where needed? And my answer to that question is probably almost always worth doing that. It's kind of just the clean way to code that, like why call a function more than once? But escaping in WordPress specifically, there is sort of an expected etiquette with escaping, is that you do it as late as possible. It's called late escaping. And so the reason that you would late escape is so that you can be 100% sure that the variable that you are about to insert into the database or about to output to the web page has been escaped without having to go back up through the code to find whether or not it did. If you just echo out a variable, when I see that, it is kind of a hint that maybe it might not be escaped. But if it's escaped somewhere upstream, then it means I kind of have to recurse through the code back down and back up again to decide. So generally, I would say sure. But when it comes to escaping, it's a weird habit to get into, but it saves a lot of time down the road if you start late escaping something and only do it when you need to.
So I think I might have this working locally.
All right.
This is great. So I basically saved that like you said, John, I took the copy I had of the JSON response, saved it. Literally is just a flat file on my local host and treating that like a quote unquote external API. Once that other API comes back, you could literally plug it in here. I think this is going to work. I'll do a quick test here in a second. But let's save it for right now. We have all of our post data set. Let's just make sure we're not blowing anything up. So it's telling us it hit something, right? It's telling us it's checking. You know what? Let me put a break return. That's a little ugly. So it's hitting it.
Shout
it's not
out
actually
to everyone
doing...
in chat who's saying that they have bought or is buying or in this video has bought the book. We all appreciate the support and
love
that's
it.
awesome. So thank you.
Okay. So it looks like we have data basically saying, hey, I found it's finding from let's quote unquote our external API. It's finding the movies. Look at all these movies it's found. Now we're not actually saving anything yet. That's what we're going to do next. We've defined our array. So we're getting all the data from the API, put in a nice little new post array variable, and now we are going to save it. And this is easy. Guess what? There's a function for that. It's called WP insert post. And basically, we're just going to pass in the variable. Now, you could put all this data right here in the function call, but this is way cleaner, right? Like I can see exactly what I'm setting above it, and then I just pass that array in. And it returns, if it's successful, it's going to give me the ID of that new post. So what do you think? Should we run this? Because when we run this, it's going to create these entries. It's only going to set this stuff so far. We haven't done images yet, but it's going to create these entries. Let's see. Let's see what happens, right? Now, before we do this,
making me nervous, Brad. Making me nervous.
We have no posts, right? We have no posts. So as soon as I click this, something's going to happen. Let's see what happens. All right. So it says it imported. Let's see if it actually did. Yeah.
Wow, look at that.
Again, so we have our title set from all the movies. We have 78 movies. We click on one. We should have the content. There's our link to IMDb. If I were to click on this, and we'll see what it looks like on the front end in a minute, it's going to take me to the IMDb page. It's cool. All right, so that's where we're at right now. Now when you do importing, get ready to delete stuff a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all these.
That's exactly right.
I probably should have made a quicker way to do this because now you're going to empty the trash. And I know I don't need to, but I like to. Okay.
I like to too.
Yeah, no more data. All right. So remember, if I click that button, it's going to import again. Now comes the fun piece. What we want to do here is we want to download that image. Remember the image URL? We want to download that, and it's using a method called side loading. So the server's going to go out, download the image, and then we're going to attach that to the post as the featured image. There's a couple, just to speed up, because I know we're short on time here. There's two functions we're going to use. The first one's called media side load image. And this is the one that actually goes and says, all right, go to this URL, this image, and download it to the server. And it's downloading it into WordPress, essentially. It's making an entry in the WordPress media library. So if I just stopped right here and saved this, it would show up in the media library, but it would not be set as the featured image. It would be attached to the post or the movie post, but it would not be the featured image. So that's step one, is downloading it into the media library. It gives us this beautiful image ID, which is the unique ID of that entry. And then now we want to set it as what, the code is post thumbnail. It's actually considered the featured image. So we're saying, hey, here's our new post ID. Here's our new image ID. Just make that featured.
And I would have wrapped that in an empty check, because if you end up with an empty image ID, then you don't want to set the post thumbnail to an empty image.
Sure.
So
you know what, John? Just kidding. That's a good thing. And another little tip too, when you're working with a lot of data, I recommend that you simplify it. Work with one piece of data, one entry first, right? Because why do I need to import 78 entries every single time I'm testing? So what I'm going to do right here is just a simple exit. You could exit, whatever you want to call it. So it's going to import that get out movie first, and then it's going to stop. So we can make sure things are working, and then we can just delete quickly if they're not. So remember, we have no images here. If we go to media, we have nothing in the media library, right? So let's do it. You guys ready?
No tricks up your sleeve, no rabbits in the hat.
Ooh. All right. So it's there. Now, is it going to show it? Ooh.
Hey.
And that's that other plugin. So this is not a WordPress core feature. I added a plugin called, hey, just add a featured image call. So if there's a featured image,
shout out Robin. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, that's a great plugin. It's very simple. But guess what? I got an image. So I got Get Out, the movie. If I go here, I still have that. I have the image as attached as the featured image. If I go to my media library, hey, there's the image. It tells me it's attached to the post. I gave it a name, the same as the movie. And it's right there. It's ready to go. It's in my install. I'm not hot linking out to someone else's server. I have just downloaded this image and uploaded it directly to my installation. Super cool, right? So, hey, why don't we see if it works for all of them? So let's go ahead and delete this permanently. We'll get rid of that exit. Now, remember, when you're downloading images, things are going to take a little bit longer because it is going out and downloading every single image. Now, 78 images shouldn't take that long, but if you're doing thousands of images, you need to factor that in because it will take long. So I'll just comment that out. Let's go back to our importer. Import.
Brad, we're at the 15-minute mark. Hey, Steve Ryan says he's picturing a reboot of an 80s sitcom featuring all three of us. That's great. It's like Perfect Strangers, like
Perfect
2.
Geeks. So, all right, look at all these great, Halloween, one of my favorites. All these great movies. Bam, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Like, how quickly have we made a pretty amazing importer? Go to our media library. So these images are attached to the posts they should be, but they're also available. You can attach them to anything you want. And what is great about this is now that we have set up our custom post type, I'm using the 2020 theme. I have not touched it at all. If you remember, I set the rewrite slug to, when I register a custom post type to movies. You can make this anything you want. I made it movies. So if I go to just my home, my screen /movies, hey, check it out. It's automatically has an archive page that shows all of the movies I just imported, and I have not touched this theme. This just does it. So in any one of these, this is the end. Pretty funny movie. You can click on it. Hey, there's our title. There's our poster. And guess what? There's our content, which links out to IMDb about the movie. Pretty cool. Now, the big problem, I won't say big problem, but something you need to consider here is if I run it again, what's going to happen? It's going to import them all again because it's not checking. It's just saying, hey, it's telling me to import. I'm going to import. So I think we have time. Very quickly, let's put in a dupe checker. All right. So this is what we're going to do. Let's see if we can make this happen. Yeah, cracks knuckles. All right. We got about 10 minutes. We're going to put a dupe checker in here. So I guess what? There's a function for that. So right when we go to check the movie, what I like to do, let's change this from importing to checking. Let's check the movie first. And this is just text. I'm just telling myself on the screen what we're doing. What we're going to do is use a function called get page by title, which sounds wrong, but it's not. There's a number of different ways you could do this. And I talked to John and Justin about it. There's a number of different functions, a number of different ways you could check this. You could maybe put a piece of post meta and just check the post meta. There's probably more performant ways to do this, but for the sake of the time, I'm going to use a function called get page by title. It's very easy. So the first thing I want to do before I create my post is say, hey, let's set a variable. We're going to use get page by title. It's a very simple function. First thing we want to do is pass in the title that we're checking against. I'm also going to escape this because, again, I don't trust that data. I don't know where it came from. So we're going to check the title, right? The next parameter is the return. I want to go ahead, an object is fine. I want to have an object back. I think you can, I forget the other, there's two other things you can return back besides an object. An object's fine in our case. And then I'm saying, all right, instead, by default, it checks only pages. The third parameter is the custom post type you want to check. Ours is called movie. So it's going to say, hey, is there a movie entry called get out? And if there is, it's going to come back and say there is. So all we have to do is simply say, look, if exists movie, maybe I should have named this something different because just saying it's a little hard, but if the movie doesn't exist, which is what I'm saying here, we're going to create it. So this is a conditional. So I'm going to go ahead and move all of this, indent all this stuff in, right? Because now we're going to say else, meaning movie does not exist, or sorry, movie does exist. It's a duplicate. Let's just say it. We'll just say, very simple. I'm just echoing right to the page. It's a duplicate. So let's go ahead and just throw that out there. I'm just going to copy that to save some typing. Again, this is just for, if I just run it and it's not telling me anything and then nothing shows up, I don't exactly know what happened. So this is just more for your own sanity to know, hey, did it work? Did it not work? Obviously, you can make this a lot cooler. This is a basic check. All right. So let's just walk through this real quick. We're saying we're checking the movie. We're checking it by the title to see if it exists. If the movie does not exist, let's go ahead and create it, which we already did. If it does exist, all we're going to say is, hey, it's a duplicate, and we're not doing anything. And then we're going back to the top to check the next movie. Because if it exists, we don't need to do anything. Or you could do something else, whatever you want. But that's basically it. So let's try it. Let's try it with one. Again, let's keep it simple, and then we'll try it with all of them. So what I'm going to do.
Probably put your exit outside of that if, right? You want to put it.
Yeah, that's right. Or else I'd have to do two, which I think I just did, or I could just do one. Let me go ahead and delete everything. Make sure everything's wiped out. We'll just start with one. We're just going to use the get out example. Oops, not the plugin, the movies, empty. Oh, let's empty the trash just to be super, super safe. It would allow duplicate titles. That's not a problem. Slugs would be a little weird with hyphens and stuff, but Okay, everything is wiped. So now let's go back to that real quick. So yeah, I can just, you're right, John. I don't need
Oh,
to.
I see. You've got two.
I
I
did
didn't
it
see the
twice,
top
but you're
one.
right. So basically outside of this, I could just say, all right, let's just do one and then drop. And just stop, right? Let's just do one. So if this works, the first time I run this, it should import. And the second time I run it, it should not, because it's going to be the same movie. So let's run it. Oh, I didn't even put a message saying it's importing, which it is, which would be nice to know. Movie importing. Okay. So let's assume we're assuming it imported. Let's look. Hey, there it is. Get out. Now,
There it is. Yep.
Now let me make sure I save. Let's run it again. And it should not import. It should skip it. Hey, checking movie. Movie's a duplicate.
Right.
So did it import? Nope. It skipped the movie. It's only skipped the media, didn't do anything. So that should work. Cool. Now let's do it for all of them. And then we'll be at a good wrapping up point. Again, when we're done, I'll post this up on GitHub. You can find it on my Twitter, Williams BA. As I'm doing this, I'll also shout out, I'm giving away a free signed copy of Professional WordPress Plugin Development. All you have to do is sign up for the Web Dev Studios newsletter. Ew. Plug.
Ew.
So go over to webdevstudios/blog. You can see it on our Twitter as well. And I will sign it. And then I will sanitize it and put it in a plastic bag.
And then escape it.
And you will.
We're at 8 minutes, Brad. So if you've got any last
This is
things,
it. This is it. If this works, I'm taking out the exit, so it's going to go through all of them, right? So the first thing we would expect is that it imports all 78. We need some good music here, John. Hey. Oh man, that camel case is killing me here. Checking, importing. So it's bringing them all in. Again, you can make this look a lot nicer. This is just an example. There's everything we were expecting. All of our movies. What do we got? What's our total? 77.
Oh, because we deleted Get Out.
Oh, right. I think that was in there. Okay. And then there's all of our media. So now if we do it one more time, what should it do? It should skip because see how fast it is because it's not going to do anything. So I can just keep refreshing. It's super fast because it's not actually importing anything. And I go look and hey, I still have 77. So
perfect.
It worked. So that's it. That's it in a nutshell. Very basic, but I think it's a cool example because even though this is basic, this is really powerful stuff. If you had to write this as pure PHP, I mean, how many lines are we at? We didn't even break 100. We didn't even not even. And I could say I planned that, but I didn't. We're at 99 lines, less than 100 lines of code, and we went and grabbed external data from an API. We registered a CPT, registered a menu. We imported that data. We even sideloaded that image and attached it to that data.
And for the folks that are asking about it in chat, we will send a link to the GitHub repo when this is over and tweet it out and all that stuff too.
Yes, awesome. I'm going to assume everyone's clapping because the importer worked. And talk about figuring it out on the fly, right, Corey? Like the API's dead and somehow
it's good. Super good. Turned out great.
Hey, I want to thank you all for doing this. You've given graciously, so generously of your time and expertise. And I want to have a big ask for everybody that's been here. This has been a free webinar. They have donated their time to you essentially today. And I don't even think we can hire any of them. So go buy the book. Show the book again, would you, Brad? Go buy this book.
Here it is.
Professional WordPress Plugin Development, second edition.
And we love a review. If you have this book, if this book has helped you, reviews go a really, really, really long way on Amazon. So if it helped you, just take literally a minute, type a couple sentences about how much you like it. But that really helps get that book in front of the people that are looking for it. So we really do appreciate it.
They do have a Kindle version. You can get the paperback like I have. Somebody asked that in the chat, but I just put the link in the chat and go do that. And even a step further, just like Brad said, man, a link makes a lot of difference. I'm not a link, a review makes a lot of difference to authors like Brad, John, and Justin. So please go do that. I tell you, before version 2 came out, I had heard nothing but amazing things about professional WordPress plugin development. Now version 2 is even better. I have it at my house. I tell people, they were asking earlier, is it for beginners? And I said, well, I don't know anything about code. And I felt like I understood the basic concept because you all have done an amazing job with that. So
thank you.
Thank you guys. And also say thanks on Twitter and put the link to the book. Okay. again, they're donating their time and expertise, years and years and years doing this, and it's invaluable. So go online, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the socials, and just give your love and gratitude. And then, of course, buy the book.
Yeah, and if you have any follow-up questions, like Corey said, you can always hit us up on Twitter. We're all in the WordPress Slack. Feel free to ping us. We're more than happy to help. That's what's great about this community. We all help each other, you know. I learned to build plugins by asking questions and hanging out with really smart people like John over the years. And so, you know, we like to help. We like to help people, and that's just the open source, you know, and WordPress mentality. So thanks for having us, Corey. This was a lot of fun. Maybe we'll do an episode 3.
I hope so. I love this. You guys keep getting better and better at this and helping people. I mean, we've had about 40 plus people in here the whole time. We've had double that easily register. So this is a hot topic. And I know you all give graciously to the open source project known as WordPress. From Brad, I know you were, you know, organizer, co-organizer, helper for WordCamp Philly for years, including WordCamp US. And John, your numerous contributions to core are renowned, and Justin as well. All the prolific work you do over at WP Tavern, and specifically your contributions to the WordPress community through Theme Hybrid and others. So yeah, hey, would you three real quick put your Twitter IDs into the chat?
I put them in there, yeah. John's JJJ, Justin's Justin Tadlock, and I'm Williams BA.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here today. And most of all, thanks again to our presenters. You've been so fantastic. And Justin's always in the chat like a ninja, man.
Yeah, he is rocking it. Thank you, Justin.
Areas of my life.
Good job.
And thanks everyone for tuning in and hanging out with us for round 2. This was a lot of fun.
Great.
And maybe next time we'll do a Gutenberg block or something else, huh?
Be good.
Easy there. Easy.
Hey, I forgot. I don't have the power.
What do I need to do here? Just hit stop.
You just hit stop. There it is.